I wish y'all could see this setup because it's legit. It's legit. He's doing it for the people.
We trying out here. We trying. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, and just to give you a background, this is the Powered AF podcast, and AF stands for Bufo Fun. I know some people got cuss words and all that stuff, but
it's crazy because the first thing I thought was. But I get it. Thank you for the clarification. I should have known better.
In this podcast, and the reason why I wanted to interview you, Sevetri, outside of your greatness and greatness precedes you, is because I think there's a lot of people that could resonate with your story, how you came to where you are, and also just the many lives you've lived, from being a bootstrapper to raising VC, to being a leader in your community as well. So I think you have a lot to say, and so welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So before we get started, how are you? How are you actually feeling?
I woke up the other day and I was actually feeling angry. I went through these different stages of emotions over the past week because I'm from Louisiana. I live in New Orleans, although I split my time between New Orleans and New York. The majority of the time I'm in New Orleans. And of course, we were recently hit by Hurricane Ida, which did tons of damage and flooding across the South Louisiana area. And even in New Jersey and New York, they got slammed by Hurricane Ida as well. And so when the hurricane was coming, I was like, okay, I'm hopeful. I'm really hopeful. And New Orleans actually didn't take on a lot of flooding, but other cities around us did, complete disaster zones, homes gone, people who can't return to their homes today. We had a complete power outage in New Orleans and other cities. And so I don't know if anyone's ever lived through the experience of having your entire city go black and staying black for days. That was what happened in New Orleans and what is still happening in other cities in Louisiana right now.
And this is sort of reminiscent of Hurricane Katrina, because how long ago did that happen?
So Hurricane Katrina, ironically, the anniversary of Hurricane Katrina was the same day that Hurricane Ida hit, the 16th anniversary. So same day, exact same day. And so the difference is, the media has this love affair with New Orleans. And so because New Orleans didn't flood, they didn't really give it as much coverage. They wanted to see people on top of their roofs. They wanted to see people dead. Let's be real. They wanted to see Kanye West saying, George Bush don't care about black people. They wanted the good stuff, right? And because they didn't get that, they didn't cover areas where people are really distraught.
And when this was happening, now I remember when Hurricane Katrina came and Hurricane Ida that just passed, there's been a lot of development and progress that's occurred. So was the impact as great as, Hurricane Katrina, or were there better things in place this time around to sort of save more lives and so not a lives get lost?
Yes. And so I will say that one of the reasons why I was hopeful, particularly for New Orleans, is that after Katrina, everyone knows that the levees broke, right? Spike Lee did a whole documentary on it for HBO, When the Levees Broke. And the Army Corps engineers came in and they built new levees. And they built one of the most sophisticated storm systems in the entire world in New Orleans. And so, Hurricane Ida's come in, it's bigger than Katrina. It's too late to call a mandatory evacuation, right? Because the storm developed so quickly, they could not call a mandatory evacuation. So there's a lot of reasons why you can't do that. So if you don't have enough time, you don't have enough time to get gas, you end up putting hundreds of thousands and millions of people on the roads, and then they end up getting stuck on the road. So you couldn't call a mandatory evacuation. And so the difference, though, is that New Orleans didn't flood, and it didn't flood because of the system that was built. So, people, it works. And we need one of these systems, as I was telling you, all across the East Coast, the Gulf. We need to hurricane-proof our cities.
Right. And I completely agree with you, especially sometimes you question, like, where does all our tax dollars go? Right? Like, where is it going if we're spending all this money? But when we have these natural disasters, it almost feels like third world country, right? Like,
oh, yes.
And help isn't being given, and not enough help and resources is moving quickly enough. And we rave about the supply chain of Amazon and Walmart, but like,
right.
How do we, prepare for these natural disasters that happen? And I almost feel like we also play a part in it because we're unprepared every single time.
We're unprepared. We also play a part in climate change, right? So the natural warming of, not even natural, like human-made disaster, right? So some of the things that we're seeing is definitely human made, and so we have to do our part. But yeah, it's also holding like governments accountable as well, because we're not in a third world country and we don't pay third world bills. Right. And that's the key. People are like, oh, you guys are privileged. Most third world countries don't even have power for the majority of the day. And that's correct, but we also pay first. You want to see my electricity? I expect this stuff to work.
Right. No, it's good that and again, I wanted to figure out where you were mentally, right? I know this is still new, this is still recent, and just to make sure I check up on you, because there's a lot of people listening in. Maybe they were affected, right?
Yes.
And so, I always try to make sure that, we're as current as possible. Now, in your own words, and, I know I glanced over the greatness of Sevetri. In your own words, who are you? How do you describe yourself?
So I would say I describe myself as definitely a serial entrepreneur. I am a Southern girl, and that's something that you can't take out of me. I am a person that loves my family and that is very loyal to the people around me and trying to like support others and see everybody win, right? So, because it's not fun if you're at the top by yourself. Right.
And I know she's very humble, very humble. And so, let the people know you're a CEO, right? You're a CEO. I know they see it when they're watching this video. They're like, wow, that's Sevetri Wilson right there. And so, what are you currently running? What's your business currently, and what does it do?
Yeah. So to talk a little bit about myself here for a second. I started my first business in 2009, Solid Ground Innovations. That was a strategic communications and management agency. Built that to, 7-figure company, and saw there was opportunity to use tech to essentially productize some of our services. And today that has allowed me to run a tech company